Go ahead and call to order the USD 489 Board of Education meeting for Monday, October 8th, 2018. First on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Bickle, second by Board Member Adams. All those in favor, aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion passes 6-0. Next, we'll open it up for audience participation. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to communications from other organizations to include the Hayes Recreation Commission September agenda and minutes and the Project 489 dinner show auction and raffle update. Does anybody have any questions on the Hayes Rec agenda and minutes included in your packet? Okay, looks like we have someone to present for the dinner show.
Good evening. My name is Chris Brown. I am the president of the USD 489 Foundation, and we are putting on an auction, fundraiser auction coming up next month, and I appreciate this opportunity to kind of give the board an update of where we're at on that auction. The first slide you'll see is the overall itinerary for the event. Again, it's November 3rd. It's at the Untitled building out at the fairgrounds. The doors do open at 4. People can come in and get a preview of the oral auction, silent auction items that will be up for bid that evening. We do have Frank Worth and the Vibrations. They will perform that evening. They start around 5 o'clock. And then dinner will be served at 5:30. The dinner is being provided by Smoke & Co. And then during that time, the silent auction items will be closing out, and then our oral auction will start at 7:30 or 7:35. And then hopefully complete that around 9 o'clock, where cinnamon rolls and coffee and juice will be served at the end. Next slide will show you some of that ticket information. Tickets did come in today or recently, and so we will be mailing those out to those people who have already purchased them. Still available are tickets to buy. They can be purchased at the superintendent's office. They're $75 a person, or if you have a table of 8, they're $500 for those tables. Seating is limited there, so as soon as we meet capacity, no more tickets will be sold. So just contact the superintendent's office for those tickets. The silent and the oral auction items, we currently have 44 oral auction items. Those are items that are over $250 in value, and there are over 200 silent auction items. Those are the items that have been given values of $250 or less. We'll still take items up for bid that are donated, either oral or silent auction. So those items won't be included in the original booklet that you get with your tickets, but there'll be an addendum to that booklet. So there's also on the oral auction an additional item that'll be just for the foundation. So you can donate tax-deductible donation just to the foundation on that oral auction item. The raffle tickets are also being sold at this time. For the raffle, you don't have to purchase a ticket to be there. So if you buy raffle tickets, you don't have to be at the event to win those. And we've got some pretty good prizes lined up for those. We've got a 2019 side-by-side Polaris Ranger. Those are $50 each, or 3 for $125. We also have some cash prizes. We've got a $1,000 cash prize. And those are $10 each, or 3 for $20. And then a $500 cash prize. Those are $5 a piece, or 3 for $10. And $500 worth of chamber checks as well. Those are the same price, 5 for each, or 3 for $10. The proceeds from our auction, we've earmarked to help pay for those secured entrances at each of the schools in the district. The oral auction item just for the Project 489, or the foundation, that'll help fund our projects throughout the year that we do. But other than that, the proceeds will go to help paying for those secured entrances at all the buildings in the district. We do have some of our sponsors here listed. These are the $1,000 sponsors for the event. You can read those. And then we also have $500 sponsors and $250 sponsors as well. We still do need some volunteers, so if anybody's interested in help volunteer, there's a lot goes into an event like this. And so, the more people that can help out, the better. And to volunteer, Sarah and Renee are kind of spearheading that part and organizing those volunteers, so. Does anybody have any questions?
So if somebody just wanted to buy raffle tickets, they would still call the superintendent's office?
Yes, that's correct, yep.
Okay.
Yep, or the board members probably as well, if you know a foundation board member, they should be able to get you tickets as well.
Okay, great. And if there are any people in the community who still want to be a sponsor, still accepting sponsors?
Absolutely, yep, we'll make sure and they get recognized at the event as well. But yeah, sponsors or even items still up for auction, we'll still take those. We'll just do an addendum to the program that you'll get with your ticket.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, you mentioned the safe entrances, so what's kind of your big target here?
Our goal is to hopefully to raise $50,000 for that.
Okay. All right.
So it's our first year. This is the first one we've put on, so we don't know. It's all new to everybody on the board, so that was the goal we thought we could achieve.
Okay. Well, appreciate your efforts helping to improve our schools and make them safer. That's great.
Do a follow-up on the secured entrances, and maybe John would be the person to answer this question. But we already have the electronic door, the buzzers to buzz in, and some cameras. Can you describe what else we're going to be doing to make the entrances more safe with this money?
Actually, the money that they will raise is going to end up going back into
Okay.
we've already spent much of that money in the process. And they've known that from months ago, but we wanted to end up, they wanted that to be a project. We wanted to have it done before they would have the fundraiser, because they started talking about this a year ago.
Sure.
And so it was just a matter that the timeline didn't match, that they'd have the money beforehand. So really the intent is, we did much of the work already, and that money will come back into the school with that intention. So.
To clarify a little bit, it's electronic buzzers, cameras, is that what we're?
It is.
So what,
Yeah, we did.
at every school?
Now, the piece that some don't know is some of these electronic doors that we had to do, it was a matter of more expensive because it was the whole door, it was the frame.
Right.
We had to switch out some of that, which made it more expensive by doing that, yeah.
Good, okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on next to school spotlights.
We have three I'd like to end up sharing. We did have Roosevelt teacher to congratulate, that's Lindy McDaniel, special ed teacher at Roosevelt Elementary School. She was named the Hayes Post Teacher of the Month, and she works in the STAR program, which is this systematic teaching with adaptions and reinforcement classroom. She was nominated by Danielle Scott, and Danielle is the aunt of a former STAR student who passed away last year. So we're very proud of Lindy for being recognized for that. We also ended up receiving money, $200 from Moms Club of Hayes, and that was to help purchase carbon monoxide detectors for families in need at early childhood connections. So the detectors will go to those families who currently reside in housing that lack a detector. Also, we had Adams, Brown, Barron, and Ball to thank for their donation of $300 for the Hope Pantry. That money is used to help families in need with food and hygiene boxes throughout the year, and that's especially during Thanksgiving and Christmas time. And to date, Hope Pantry has given out 576 boxes of food and hygiene supplies and clothing since it began in 2015.
All right, next we'll move on to the report of the superintendent.
I have nothing this evening.
All right. Next, we'll move on to the consent agenda. It is to include the board meeting minutes from September 24th, 2018, the approval of bills in the amount of $2,583,864.22, and personnel transactions. Ugh.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay. It's been moved by Paul, second by Sophia. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to old business. We'll start with the transportation purchase. Looks like Russ is here. Does anybody have any questions from our last discussion with him? Sorry, I'm scrolling.
I do have a question. And it's kind of related to this and others, but one of the things that predates you, John, is the options on the agenda items. And the intent of that was that we would have options. For instance, on this one, we had the option of buying a gas bus or diesel bus, but that's not what's really presented here. It's option one is accept as presented, or option two, don't, and do something else. And that's not really for as much as for this issue, but it just seems that if we're going to have options, we would actually have those spelled out, to where we could have those instead of just, because our option always is that we don't approve it. And, I think, I hope everybody up here is smart enough that realizes that that's always an option, but.
And the other option would be, instead of the gasoline, it'd be another diesel, is what you're
Right.
saying, okay?
And that's on this one, but I think the intent was that we would have multiple options with, a cost-benefit analysis for each one, or not really cost, but just the pros and cons of why we would do it, and what supports the options, and what the negatives are for the options, so.
Okay.
I think that was brought up when we were talking about different options for the computers and different devices. I would agree with that. Does anyone have anything else? Any questions?
Can you just remind me which vehicles we're replacing?
I mentioned a couple weeks ago, that kind of depends. We look at that decision when school's about out. So between the buses and cars, Suburbans, because like I said, the buses take 6-7 months to come in, so that's April or May before they come in. The Suburban and car, when we order them, that's in the springtime before we get them. So we'll kind of wait till we get closer to that situation. We get the cars in, get them in service before we put on Purple Wave, decide which ones we're going to get rid of, in case we had a lot more issues between now and then. So.
I thought the reason we were doing the gas bus now was that it was available, and if we waited till past the 25th, the cost would go up.
The cost will go up on all buses after the 1st of November, on all vehicles. Not just the gas bus, but that'd be any diesel bus also. You mentioned the other if there was other options. Instead of the gas route bus you mentioned, if we went to the diesel route bus, that price would be $93,755 instead of the $87,669, which would still keep us under our budget.
About 6,000, is that?
Yeah, ballpark. Yep.
Well, do you think, we talked about this last time, but, for $6,000, it just seems the diesel's a more stable choice, that's going to last, that we know is going to work. And do you have any different opinions than you did last time?
Nothing different from 2 weeks ago.
And I never did search out any more information on that. I just found it odd. There was 2 other superintendents in the state who had sent out a request of information of who else is considering gasoline buses, since that information was sent out of the concern of the emissions with the diesels. So I'm just saying it clearly has stirred up at least a couple other districts as far as their process of what they're going to do. It's not just a discussion in our district, clearly.
And the reason for that wasn't the engines as much as the emissions, just
The
the
emissions
cost?
side of it, yes, not the diesel engine, but the emissions that go on it.
And that's, I'm assuming that's repair costs?
Yeah, yes.
I mean, I guess at the end of the day, $6,000 is $6,000. It's still under the budget. I'd be fine switching it to a diesel, but your recommendation was to keep it with gas. You've been doing this for 5 years. I trust your recommendation as well. I guess I'm fine with either.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear, I think that the discussion was we were going to save more fuel, but I think we'll actually spend more on fuel because the gas will be significantly
The fuel's
less.
not what I'm interested in, it's the repair cost in the future
But
and the success that other districts have had with the gas engine.
what engine is that, does that have in it? The
The
diesel,
it's a Cummins engine.
which version?
It's an ISB 6.7, I think.
Wasn't that about what they put in the, and that's what mine has in it. And I've not, I mean, I just, that's
Again, the
exact same
Cummins is
motor
a-
that they're putting in 2,500, 3,500 pickups and, or similar anyway, and they haven't had, I'm not aware of any issues with those.
And the engine's not what I'm talking about, it's on the emission side.
But they all have the DEF or urea and the particulate filters and.
Mhm.
Does anyone else have any more questions? Does anyone want to make a motion?
All right. Make a motion to accept the bid for purchases totaling $291,790.25 as presented.
Second?
It's been moved by Board Member Adams, second by Board Member Oborny. Any other discussion? Call for the vote. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion passes 6-1. Moving
Thank
on
you.
now. Yep, thank you, Russ.
Thanks, Russ.
Moving on now to the Early Childhood Connections Federal Assistance SF-424 grant approval. And I guess.
Yeah, I can share that this evening, we were with hopes to have that approval, as well as then we would have the resolution that I had shared with you last week, that a little bit of the problem with the resolution was just a matter of timing. We needed 2 pieces of information for the resolution that we don't have right now, and that was the exact rate for interest and the bank that we would be working with. And we were not able to get those bids until, it'd be Wednesday afternoon at 2 is when we would have all that.
So then this will just be
This is
held
just-
for until a special board meeting is decided after that information? Or do
No,
you
the
need just?
grant.
You need the grant, just the grant
Right.
part tonight?
The understanding too of grant approval, you can approve the grant, but if along the way, as we were talking, things fall through with the purchase, the
We can
grant,
return.
even though you accept it, the money goes back, so, yeah.
Are we going to get some sort of an update on the contract negotiations?
Yes, I'm very hopeful. I was talking to the realtor today, and it sounds as if there's great optimism we'll have that information on the Wednesday as well, about the contracts and,
Should we not have that information first before we're voting to approve this other stuff, or?
well, as I said, the approval of this, if the other doesn't work, it really, that money goes back. You're approving it in the process of the other falling in place. Just the resolution as well, if I'll review that. There's things that can fall into place that this project may still not occur, simply because you have the 2 weeks that it has to be in the paper, okay, the resolution. Then you have 30 days after that, which makes about 45 days, where in that 30 days, there's the option for a petition to be put together, which then, if there is a petition that gets 5% or more of the voters in this area, then it would force it to go to an election. Now, if that happened, then we would know in 45 days that, again, we'd be sending that money back. Because if we were forced to go to an election, that would have to be a special election, and it would be late enough. There's no way we'd be able to do it within that time frame of the end of June, by this summer. So it's a little bit like the approval that was done back in May, the approval of trying for the grant. At this point, it's the approval of accepting the grant, but again, we would be turning around and sending it back if those things don't.
Do we have to spend the money by the end of June?
Yes. They want us to end up, just as they wanted it out of their coffers by October 1st, the other thing is they are wanting this to be spent by the end of June. That's correct.
Do we think we can do that?
With the timeline, I mean, like I said, no, if there has to be an election. If there's an election, no.
I'm just talking about getting contractors lined up and get them in and started and completed in 6 months.
I'm told yes.
So from the time we confirm the resolution and everything with the interest rate and all that, and so when will it get put in the paper then? What's the date of the?
We would be putting it in the paper, it'd be the very end of this week, or it has to be, paper has to be given 3 days after we know the details. So it'd be, Saturday or Monday is when it'd be first in the paper. And it has to be in the paper 2 weeks.
And we would have a contract signed by then?
We should have contracts by Wednesday. So as far as signature of the contracts, that can be done in that time frame. The other piece that's being worked on is the appraisal that was requested, and that's being worked on as well as far as a timeline. I think that's something that would be done, well, I know that'd be done within the 45 days, but I'm saying that's in that time frame, hopefully within 30 days that we would have that in place too.
Who's doing the appraisal?
Don't have that identified yet.
Who's picking the person to do these things?
Well, Riedel is working on that. Robert Riedel is.
Wouldn't we want to pick our own appraiser? I mean, generally, you're going to, I would think, are they acting as the buyer's agent or the seller's agent?
Well, at this time, they're more of the buyers because there's other agents involved with there's 5 people who own. Okay, so Riedel is working for, I forget if it was 2 or 3 of those 5, but there's a couple that end up are working with others, so.
That would be a seller's agent, right? They're
Well,
working for them.
for a couple of them, yes.
Well, it just seems that we would want to select our own appraiser to do it versus having the seller pick their appraiser.
Do you have a recommendation, Greg?
Well, there's only one that I know that does commercial appraisals in Hayes, but there's others outside of Hayes.
Right.
I don't have his names on them.
I'd be comfortable doing it that way.
Okay, I can sure check on that. It's more a matter of the timeline, and I didn't, as far as one appraiser, I'll become more involved in that and try to find out what our options are. We want to have it as soon, within the 30 days if possible too. That's what we're working for.
I love that the narrative kind of explains some of the purpose, with the the age of Washington, you know, and the problems we've been having. I know we've talked about the sewer and some of that stuff. I think some of that stuff we've kind of tried to keep quiet about too, because, you know, you don't want to air your dirty laundry per se. The other thing I like is like even the second paragraph, it talks about some of the changes, the HVAC system would come. I guess the one thing that I did want to mention that I didn't see on here is I've had some people question, you know, well, how come you can't take this grant and just put it towards Washington or put it towards something else? But it is specifically for this facility. That's the way it was written, correct?
Yeah, well, it was, the brainchild of it came when we first were talking about this months ago of the possibility of that property. And when it became an issue of too much money with renovation being considered, that's when Donna stepped in of saying, well, this may be a possibility of getting a federal grant to take care of the renovation. So yes, it was specific for this project. It's not for anything else.
I just thought that'd be good to add.
Yeah.
If we're, and I know we had a discussion to put off any, or I made a motion and it got approved to put off the bond discussion until January, but at least where we were ending, or we left off on that, was talking about going to 2 or 3 elementaries, which would leave 1 or 2 or 4. Should have Lincoln, Washington, O'Laughlin, and potentially Wilson, if, depending on which plan was selected, as open buildings. And I know at one point the plan was that O'Laughlin would serve the same role that this building would serve, and it just seems that we're kind of, I mean, if we end up going the same route with the bond and breaking it into pieces, you're then going to have just vacant buildings that you have nothing to do with, while as we received all of the letter from Josh Waddell, you know, we were taking a private business off the tax roll, and I know that we've already moved to go forward, but it just seems that one of the problems with rushing things is there's often things that are overlooked and not thought through, and those are just a handful of them that have been brought out by the community in a short period of time.
Well, I do agree with that. It's just that that bond that we had tried for was talking about at least one new elementary. And new construction was of question too, of whether or not there'd be support for that. Because that increases the tax dollars. The public would pay higher taxes. So you have that as a negative. The negative on this would be taking that piece of property off of the tax roll, but at the same time, there's not increased tax dollars for the bond. So you can look at it, you know, either way. We do have different options, that's true. The only reason why this option's become one that came back to us and became prioritized differently was because we got the grant. If that grant would not have been offered to us, we wouldn't be talking about this. And it has, I think, something to do with the size of the grant too.
Yeah, I agree. And another point is if we had applied for a grant to put this money into Washington or Lincoln, I don't think we would have gotten the grant. As it was explained to us that this is kind of a rare thing to get these kind of grants. And there's no way that, I would assume there's no way that they would have put that money into an old building.
I was gonna say, or we get some for much, much, much less.
Oh, but we don't, I mean, that's all speculative. We don't know if they would have gotten it. I mean, just like saying that if we don't take it now, we'll never get it again. You don't know that.
We don't know that, but it's a high probability. I think that's, anyone dealing with grants knows this is kind of a rare thing.
I would be very surprised.
Besides, another way to think about this, if we do move along with this and we're able to get rid of, sell Washington, sell the land, then that puts more money into the tax rolls for the city.
But my understanding is that part of this $1.4 million is that is going to include the demolition costs of Washington.
We still have
Not-
the land to sell.
Not part of that, part of the 2 million. See, we end up, part of that 2 million, you're saying we're buying all that, but the money that comes back, what the hospital was saying that there'd be that money that come back to us, that money that comes back to us would be utilized for that purpose.
But that's what I'm saying, out of
Yes.
this, you know, the net project is going to be $3.5 million, and it's going to include demolishing that building. And those
Okay,
are,
that's fine, but the land is still there, and that's probably more valuable than the building itself.
except for it's in the floodplain. And, you know, I mean, I think, and that's fine, that it's probably more valuable as a piece of land than with the building on it, but it's just, I think one of the questions that nobody's really, or an answer that nobody's come up with is, where is the extra money going to come from if it's more than the $3.5 million? Because we have no cost estimates other than from the realtor on what it's going to cost to renovate this. We do have the one from DLR that they did a Safeway store, but this is much different than that. That was one building, this is 4, so heat and air becomes more expensive when you do that. And I mean, are we going to then do another lease for more money?
That's speculation, I don't know.
Well, but it is speculation, but we should have a plan for that.
But John said during the last discussion that the renovations are what we make them to be. So if we have that budget of what we set forth and we're not going to exceed that, then the renovations will not exceed the cost.
Well, and part of the question, at least a couple board members asked was, is this plan that this project's going to end up looking as wonderful as the one that was just referred to, the one that was that grocery store that was switched over. The idea there is you can renovate something and renovate it for $5 million, $3 million, $1.5 million. You can use all kinds of amount of money for what kind of furnishings, you know, how it ends up looking. We're identifying it and sharing it at the front end that this is how much money we have to spend. And that's it. It may not be as, what you'd say, all the extra perks that you'd like to have, but it's still going to be functional and it's still going to end up being, at this point, we believe that is enough money to end up doing the renovation project. So that was the plan. Now, I know that I know the last meeting kind of moved us ahead with this. This one, I understand the discussion, but truly this one comes down to, clearly this, we would want this money to move ahead. You know, right now, as far as approving this particular grant, clearly if we're moving ahead, you want this grant. And that's really that's what this topic is. We want a formal approval of acceptance of this money.
Have we made a motion to that effect yet? I can't.
Not yet. I was ready to make the motion.
Fire away, Paul.
Okay. I'd like to move that we accept the Early Childhood Connections Federal Assistance SF-424 grant in the amount of $1,473,103.
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Adams, second by Board Member Oborny. Open it back up for more discussion.
Yeah, and just to clarify, this is only just saying, yeah, we'll accept the money, but that final decision, or if the community comes back and says, no, we think you've made a mistake, petition, whatever it may be. But if we don't move this step forward, we have to move this step forward. It doesn't commit us to a building at this point. But without it, then we might as well rescind our previous vote. That's where I see it.
It doesn't, I see what you're saying, it just,
It's
again,
just
it
an
would just be
accept-
nice to have that other information.
Yeah.
That's the only frustrating part.
But I think that's part of, yeah, I think that part we can still do so we get more.
This feels a little redundant, because I know last time we approved
It is out
something
of sequence.
which was supposed to be a 1303 application to accept the grant, so this is another piece of paper to accept the grant.
Oh, yeah, that's for you. On the paper.
Oh, the paper that's in front of you, it's a matter of, it's a request for a funding request for major renovation. Okay, so it's a funding request. This is one that has the size that clearly it needs to be then formalized by accepting it, and all 7 board members be involved in that process. I follow what you're saying, redundant. We actually had that conversation. I appreciate, we had that conversation a week ago of saying, is this a necessity? But it was I that said that I feel that it needs to go to the board to say, yes, we do accept this, we do approve it. I follow what you're saying because that was part of the discussion. But
Does anyone else have additional comments or questions?
I'm still interested in learning more about our opportunities with this grant and getting more feedback from the community. I think their input so far has been really good, so I support continuing exploring this option.
And is it exploring the grant, or is it exploring the options of the construction with the public, I guess?
I think we're beyond exploring, and we've
Well, and
already moved forward to do it.
No, I think you're talking about the
Well,
construction.
yeah.
Hearing.
And I know
because
there's just still a lot of missing pieces for all of us, so, I mean, I'm curious to still continue to find answers to all of that.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and call for the vote then if there's nothing else. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
You too? Okay. Motion passes 5-2. All right. Next on the agenda is the workbook material fees for 2019-2020.
a couple of years ago, we ended up having a request that was made of looking at this at an earlier time. Please understand, there's no intention of making decisions tonight. It's a matter of that open discussion of looking at what are some of the workbook material fees that we end up having. And when you look at the list of having that $90 for the workbook material fee, a couple of years ago, I think it was $135, and now it's $90. Now for this year, it wasn't decreased this year, it was the year before. But we have the technology fees, we have activity fees, there's driver's education fee, you have summer school fees. Now when you get down, there's quite a list where you have all of the food, breakfast, lunch. You can have more control of that. I would say typically we've not done that. We've kept it as low as we possibly can, and usually it came from the state in saying we've got to increase it a nickel or we've got to increase it a dime. So that's been more of how that's happened. But the conversation has been, if I would, I think 2 years ago, the biggest item was when it was $135 for the materials, workbooks, and really was trying to put that at a lower amount and succeeded in dropping it to 90. I want to point out that we want to have some discussions this year on this as to what we may do for next year. I can tell you right now some of what we're looking at may be that difference between the high school and the middle school's technology fee. That will be some discussion because one's $50 and one's $25. And another one that's come up is the driver's education fee, because we have been doing well with that particular budget. And so there's a question there of is it time that we perhaps not have that fee as high? So that will come as well. But I guess open discussion by anybody at this time on these particular fees, and just in preparation that we'll have it, I'm sure, at least 1 or 2 more times before the end of this, before this school year.
Do you have, I guess something that would help me is to see where the amount of money that was generated versus the amount that we've spent. To see if we have a surplus built up in any of those, or if we're running a deficit.
I can definitely gather that and send it to you even tomorrow. If you're talking about how much was brought in 17, 18, for instance, and just have an understanding of how much money.
Revenue versus expenditure.
Yeah, I know we can gather that. I have some of that with me right here, but I can get the rest of that in that comparison and send it to you all.
I
I'd be
had some
curious to
questions.
see if our surface repairs, I mean, that we seem to have a lot of problems with the surfaces, and now those are switched. I'd be curious to see if some of those, that bracket or that repair cost area hopefully goes down.
Well, and Luke, that is the reason why there is that discussion
Sure.
of 50 for one and 25 for the, yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Well, on the technology fee, are we still insuring, or if you break it non-accidentally, or if it's broken, not a warranty claim, do we pay that?
Actually, if we have warranty on the machines at this time, that they will end up paying for different kind of damage. Now, there's still that damage that is not going to be covered, and we have had
Those have accidental damage on them, don't they?
the new ones, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, but not the other
Surface
machines.
ones, correct. Now, is there a, and that was one of the things I didn't know, that Scott, is there a deductible on that? A lot of times there is on the accidental. I mean, they'll cover it if, you know, if there's something on there, but sometimes there's a deductible on the accident piece. I'd
I'm
just be
sorry,
curious.
Well, if so, what is it and who's paying it?
Well, and from a parent perspective, I can tell you I've had to replace a surface screen.
Yeah. Well, and
It was like
the Surface, no, I just didn't know on
It
the
was like
Dells.
$200.
With the Dells.
So-
and-
Yeah,
and
these new machines, actually.
have a warranty.
Maybe we could include that a bit in see, we have a presentation set for the end of the month with those machines, kind of an update on it. But I can send that out ahead too. I'll try to find out that question about the deductible on it. But,
I have a question on the activity fee. What lodging is that paying for?
I would rather answer that and know exactly what it is, so I will check on that too.
And student subscriptions as well. My understanding of those activity fees is those go to the high school and they go in their budget and don't really flow through any of ours. Is that correct?
Okay, the second part you just asked me, what was it?
On the high school activity fees, and I also have them on the elementaries, but that all the activity fees go to the high school and that's just their money to spend as they choose?
Well, the activity fees end up paying, I mean, they're all related to sports or the extracurricular activities, yes. Yes, that's correct.
Then my understanding is that, like at the elementary schools, the after-school program money goes to the schools, not to the district?
Well, the school ends up using it. I mean, they're using it for that purpose. We have it funneling it that way. Instead of it coming to the district, then the district's actually, and that's been a question mark as to how we may want to do that in the future. But yes, you're right, we end up having it set that way. There was a question just in the last couple weeks as to should we consider those fees actually coming one direction instead of 4 different secretaries at elementaries handling that, if it was coming just funneling to one person perhaps at the district, and they're the ones handling it. So that was a conversation if we wanted to change that. It'd be more consistent. You'd have less people that are actually managing that as far as having that skill.
Well, I'm concerned too, like on the workbook fee, we don't pay that to Roosevelt. If your kid goes to Roosevelt, you don't pay the workbook fee to Roosevelt, and they use it just at Roosevelt, right?
No, the workbook fee comes, okay,
Right,
yeah.
so the after-school care is the same. We pay out of the district's money, we pay the salaries and the overhead for all of it. but yet the money goes there into kind of a fund that, a slush fund, so to speak, that they can do with as they choose, which doesn't seem to me to be the appropriate means by which to do that.
Okay.
And I mean, I've always had, and we've had some issues years ago with, like the high school activity fees being used for things that after reviewed weren't what they were supposed to be used for. And so, I mean, and the more you have those funds out there, the more of a potential liability you have.
No question. There, actually, that comes up every year of saying the least amount of hands that are dealing with that or trying to track it, the more possibilities of problems that you end up having. So.
All those funds are audited though. and
Yes.
we have made changes
That's-
Right.
to audit.
No,
I don't think we're not.
No, and my concern just more is from a more of a budgetary standpoint, that if those monies were all coming in, we could look at those in a bigger picture and, the school might say, well, we want this item, but that might not be what's best for the district at that
Or
time.
is
So-
it truly self-funded if enough of the.
Right.
Well, even this early on, there are, I can check into the deductible on the machines at the high school, have that information. Lodging and student subscriptions have more information on it. And then also the after-school fees, that's more procedure. And we've discussed that already, and it's a good point. It's one that maybe needs to have some changes to it. But we have, not because the auditors found anything of problem, it's just that as they're saying, you try to make it as streamlined as possible with that.
Be a more efficient way to do it.
Yeah.
One last thing on the workbook fee. I know it's been talked about for years about reducing it or eliminating it. It would be nice to see what that looks like, if we did eliminate it this
Yeah.
year, or cut it in half, or whatever the situation may be. Where does that leave us, and where does that money come from?
Okay. Well, and what would be good for you to know on that is, what does possibly $10 deduction equate to total? That sometimes helps when you're saying, shoot, if we just cut the $90 to $80, how much is that we're not going to, to be able to bring
And maybe
in?
that'd be the way to look at it, in $10, you can multiply that out.
Right.
It does help when the principals' budgets, all of what they spend for classrooms. So I know when we visit with this central admin, without knowing if we're gonna have the increase in funding like they project, this has already been built into the budget a lot. There are some of those material fees that we're trying to build a textbook because we aren't doing the no fund warning when we have zero balance. So we are trying to add that so that as we need curriculum materials, but really everything else is built into the budget that goes directly to buildings and classrooms and instructional use. But, we could definitely show that. That would be my concern about eliminating it, is finding the dollars somewhere else.
Right, and that's what I'm getting at, is where would those be pulled from to make up for that?
Right. And it would help for you to, the one piece I do have information was the workbook material fee in 17-18 brought in $185,000.
And we expended all 185,000, or?
Well, it's in that textbook fund where you say we've either used it or it's in plans for another curriculum change of
So that's all.
switching out,
Those
yeah.
decisions about.
Right.
if we-
And is that still where, because I know in the past several years, I know we've also talked about, because those did go up several times over the last, and have we, I guess, reevaluated those? I mean, we still feel that's where those need to be as far as from a,
We're what you see.
with like the workbook material fees and stuff like that?
Oh. Well, that's what we will,
Actually, that's what we talked about, 2 years ago of saying, the perfect situation is no fees.
Sure.
The issue is you have no fees, and basically you have your general fund that's kind of that has that money go out. Our issue that we ended up getting into, and many districts, is when you have fees and they increase and you get more of them, you become more and more dependent upon them to get through the year. And it's more of a process, as we're talking, of what is a responsible whittle down. You know, the $35, I think everybody was $45 we were pretty proud of being able to do a couple of years ago.
Sure.
But what we're talking about is, it was really in that area. For this year, maybe we should be looking at more of the areas and getting a total amount. I mean, if driver's ed does not hit all kids.
Right.
Okay, it's just a select group. But it's a good number of freshmen that do end up participating in that. Decreasing it will help some families without a doubt. Then you go to technology fee. If that could be decreased some, again, that would affect, again, maybe not all students, but all students in the high school, if that's what we identify. The only one that really kind of hits, well, except for food, but the one that really hits everybody is that workbook material one. And I think that's why we were so pleased with that decision a couple of years ago, is because it really hit everybody in that regard. But it's the one that actually has, I'd say, more dependence that we have at this point in trying to go year to year with the materials in the classroom and trying to keep updated with what we need. So,
Yeah, I think we wanted to let you know, because we assume it continues to be a goal of the board to reduce those, so it's a constant conversation piece we have. Right now, I don't believe our recommendation would be to decrease the work material fee until we know where we are budget-wise with new money, but it is that technology fee at the high school is something we are looking at because of the new machines and the difference in cost of repair, so that's something we feel like we might be able to recommend, but this is being shared just so you know our thought process and to help bring you along as we are looking at things and see what questions you might have.
Okay.
and I can share some information, as I said, with you even in the next week or two, but I wasn't necessarily thinking that we would turn around and have this on the agenda late October, maybe not even November, you know, it's just
And I guess that
about,
was my question,
Yeah.
is making sure we're evaluating that each year.
yeah, I was thinking have another meeting maybe in a couple months and then have more discussion on it and be prepared, because we're not going to be comfortable in making any decisions probably until close to the end of the school year.
And a lot of these fees, I mean, when we first implemented, or a lot of these went up, I mean, one of the things that we said was, you know, that when we got to the point that we didn't fill, you know, we go down. As with any fee, once you add them in, it's awful tough to take them back out, but
Right.
I guess I'd just like to make sure we're at least looking at those.
Does anybody else have any questions about the fees or discussion items that you want John to look into? Okay. Moving on, we will go to the September 20th count and preliminary reporting.
You wanna talk?
I can. We have presented there in front of you just the head count from last year's SO 66 where we are. We will submit October 11th, this Thursday is when we submit to KSDE that report. And we have been projecting about 30 increase, looking basically at our incoming kindergarten and our exiting seniors. And you can see that the bottom right green is the difference in head count that we would be looking at compared to last year. And you can follow along. Some of the decreases are with smaller classes moving up, and then also some of the increases. Now, weightings will bear into this with audits as far as transportation weighting, bilingual, all those have to do with the minutes and those collections. That's not in there, this is just head count. So that's what we're projecting, and those are the numbers we'll submit to the state.
What's not graded? I was looking.
Those are our over 18, their cohort group has graduated. They are learning center students, so
Okay.
we did have a decrease in those, yes. And they are funded based on course completion. Those under 18 whose cohort class has not graduated, we put in the full-time 6-hour days twice to get a full FTE for those. So the funding is different based on the cohort class graduating for our learning center. So we just wanted to share where we were at. If you don't have any questions, that's really all we had.
Does anyone have anything for Shanna? Next item is discussion by board members and agenda requests. And one item already listed is the Kansas Association of School Boards Annual Conference on December 1st and 2nd.
And please let us know if there's anybody who has interest in that. If you're looking at December 1st, 2nd, just call myself or Sarah. The other item I wanted to share, which I think, well, I did earlier, is at the next meeting, we're looking at having information about the devices, that was requested at an earlier time, so that will be in place. And so,
Will that information be about where the Google project is, or the Chrome
Planning
use?
to present a timeline on the Chromebooks, where we've
Okay.
been and where we're at and how that's progressing, and then an update with the high school on the
Okay,
new devices.
so there's
Those were the
Two items, I wanted to be sure
Of
that
that.
there's 2 items, all right.
How many people do you typically have go to the convention, KASB convention?
one,
Okay.
We had
Two.
2 last year.
Where's it even at?
it's in Wichita.
I guess my real question, is there a limit? I mean, do you only want one person to go, or?
No,
Oh, it's in the lake.
please, last year it was in Wichita, this year it's in Kansas, Overland Park. But to say that we just want one, that's not
Well, I guess-
at all.
Well, it costs
Some-
money, so I don't want to.
Well, I know, but
It's- There's a vote that we actually have a vote in, and we have to designate somebody, so I don't know, have we done that already?
I thought we did something at the beginning of the year, was that for that?
Well, that was
wanted
different.
Sophia to start.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
true,
Yeah, I went last
we
year,
did-
people started voting and I was overwhelmed.
I think she was. who we
I think you're still the
previously appointed.
designated person.
I think Paul is too.
but
Oh,
no, it was just one.
sorry, Paul.
There wasn't
Oh,
two.
yeah.
Are you going?
But Mike, your answer is this: if there were 3 individuals who wanted to attend, they could attend.
I really recommend it. I got a lot out of it.
Okay.
I do a lot of conferences.
Yeah, you do.
I think I have to be in
What-
Olathe for a conference that day. Oh, yeah.
You
Just
try
swing
that
by.
on the other side.
All right, anybody else have anything else they want added to the agenda? No? All right. All right, next we will move on to executive session. I move the Board of Education recess into executive session along with the board attorney, the superintendent, assistant superintendent, to discuss matters relating to employer-employee negotiations, whether or not in consultation with the representative or representatives of the public body or agency, according to KSA-75-4319B3, with the open session to resume in this room at,
We starting 20 minutes. Do you want to?
yeah, we blow that out of the water all the time.
Okay.
You think that's enough, Greg? All right, Greg, I'm gonna hold you to that. 7:50.
Really a question how much aerobic
Is there a second?
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion passes 7-0.